But if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see.
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. I mean, come on. Take a look at the record.
He says, take a look at the record. Presumptive Democrat nominee Joe Biden taking heat over that interview, including from our next guest, who calls the comments arrogant and condescending.
Republican Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, joins us now. Senator, thank you for joining us. Obviously, a very sensitive moment. I was pointing out earlier in the show, it is because of the African-American vote in South Carolina. Joe Biden is relevant and is likely headed for the nomination. What do you make of these comments, and what do you make of his record?
Well, there's no doubt that if you look at it, the fact that he is the nominee, basically speaking, it's because South Carolina's African-American population stood up and trusted not Joe Biden as much as they trusted Jim Clyburn and followed Jim Clyburn's endorsement of Joe Biden. That is why he is sitting in the position he is in, which only reinforces the negative narrative that Joe Biden ain't woke. I'll say it the way that he would say it if he was on an African-American station. Condescending and arrogant when you say it like that. He's playing to an audience, assuming that the audience, they're not smart enough to figure it out. And I'm glad that Charlemagne called him out on that negativity and that arrogance. And frankly, I would love to have a conversation about Joe Biden's record versus Donald Trump's record. Can we please have that conversation on national TV? Fox News, the CNN, the ABC, this is a record that the president will win on. Think about the Opportunity Zone legislation in and of itself. President Trump has helped create a $75 billion investment into the poorest communities. And now Lindsey Graham and the president are working to bring broadband into those poorest areas. The ability to connect people who today are unconnected for learning, for medicine, and for jobs of the future. What has but Joe Biden done in the last 20 years? And the answer is crickets. Think about the 1994 crime bill that disproportionately targeted African-American males. What did President Trump do? He came back with the First Step Act and said, we are going to have fairness in sentencing. We're going to help people who are coming out not return. That is a form of compassion that can be measured by the lives changed, by the families impacted. And so for Joe Biden to say to 1.3 million African Americans who voted for President Trump that they ain't black is arrogant, condescending, and it frankly speaks to the families of the 1.3 million African Americans as well.
So well said.
You know, Senator, I'm always inclined to think that, you know, a comment like this, the one Joe Biden made on the Breakfast Club, would have some consequences for him when it comes to voters. But the thing is, when you look back in history, this is not the first time that Joe Biden has made a comment like that, and he continues to get away with it. Let's just take a look back in this clip.
Sure.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids. He's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
I've had a great relationship. In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Wow.
So this is a pattern of behavior. Will it matter to voters this time around?
I think it will, mostly because folks like Charlemagne and other folks in the celebrity community and the African-American community are coming out saying, wait a second, let's actually take a look at the record and see what he's produced. The crack cocaine disparity is something he produced. Most African Americans find that to be deplorable. I've already mentioned the crime bill. Kamala Harris, when she was debating him on the stage, talked about his opposition to integration. There are so many clear points, landmarks in his career, that if we have a chance to debate the issues, a chance to debate his performance, what we will say is President Trump, wait, let me get this right. President Trump has provided the highest level of funding for historically black colleges and universities in the history of the country? You mean to tell me that it was President Trump who made the permanent funding for those HBCUs permanent for the next 10 years? Then they'll say, you mean to tell me that President Trump is the one that focused on sickle cell anemia, a disease that is rampant in the African American community, and not Vice President Biden? You mean to tell me that the Opportunity Scholarships in Washington, D.C., supported by Dianne Feinstein, Cory Booker, Tim Scott, Ron Johnson, sign into law, that continues to provide public charter schools more resources? Wait a second. I thought that would be, no, it's not Biden. It's Donald J. Trump, who I have already predicted would not receive 8% of the African American vote, but a 50% increase, at least 12%. And the reason why is that the more we focus on his record, it becomes more and more undeniable that if you were looking for proof in the pudding and not rhetoric that is condescending, you go with President Trump and not with Vice President Joe, John, Bo Biden. I mean, you just don't do it. You go with the guy who's producing results. And frankly, I am just amazed that the last decade, Democrats have had an entitlement mentality that they are entitled to the black vote. And President Trump said, and he said it well, there's nothing to lose by giving the Republican Party a second look. It's like cornflakes. Taste them again for the first time. President Trump, our president.
Senator, you lay out a devastating case. Well said. Joe Biden went on to talk a little bit more about President Trump. Here's a portion of it.
2016 is totally different. What you had then is you had somebody who didn't know it all. They wanted to just change the system the way it was. He was the biggest change. Right now, we're in a situation where it's like, that Carney show goes through town once and you find out there's no pee under any one of those 3 shells that get pushed around. Mm-hmm. Next time it comes back, what do? Next time it comes back, you ain't playing. You got to figure it out.
Senator, people wanted a change in 2016 from the Obama-Biden administration.
Yes, and they got it. And here's the thing. No one can blame anyone for a global pandemic. So the question is, what type of leadership did President Trump provide for the communities at risk, comparatively speaking, to the previous administration or any administration? What President Trump provided was simply the lowest unemployment rate in the history of this country for African Americans, for Hispanics, 50-year low for our nation, 70-year low for women. But more important than just the unemployment rate, we had an increase in the labor force participation within the African American community. Out of the 7 million jobs that President Trump created during his administration, 2/3 went to black folks, brown folks, and women. I am looking forward to the conversation about what has he done for me lately, or Wendy's, where's the beef? Let's just get ready to rumble, because this is something we can absolutely, positively, unequivocally win. This should be an easy one. And if we have a debate on the issues, bless his heart, Joe Biden.
Senator, let's talk quickly about things you're trying to do here. The Senate, you're looking to release a measure offering a skills training credit worth $4,000 to workers displaced by the coronavirus. What is it?
Well, here's what we're seeing in the coronavirus. Many jobs may never come back. And when you hear Twitter say all employees stay at home, Facebook says over the next few years, half of the employees will stay at home. It's one of the reasons why broadband is so important. I thank the president for focusing on that issue. The other thing is, how do we help the folks who are unemployed get the retraining necessary for the gig economy? How do we help them bridge the digital divide? We do that through a tax credit that says if you will go to a training program to help you be able to design web development, to work on digital opportunities, that's the place to go.
Absolutely. Senator Tim Scott, thank you so much for joining us on this Saturday morning. Fantastic stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Senator.